My husband was fine with my body count until his brother joked. Now he's questioning everything. I'm sitting on our king-sized bed, the one we bought together after moving into this house 3 years ago, scrolling mindlessly through my phone while waiting for Ethan to finish showering. My husband of 5 years is humming some tune I don't recognize, and I can hear the water hitting the tile as I swipe through Instagram stories. Babe, did you remember to RSVP for Mike and Sarah's wedding? I call out, not looking up from my phone. Already did it last week, Ethan replies, his voice echoing off the bathroom walls. Unlike some people, I don't wait until the last minute. I roll my eyes, even though he can't see me. That's Ethan, always on top of things, always responsible. Sometimes annoyingly so. At 36, he's 4 years older than me and never lets me forget it, especially when he's being all mature and put together. We still need to get them a gift, I say, setting my phone down. The wedding's in 3 weeks. The water shuts off, and a moment later, Ethan emerges with a towel wrapped around his waist, his dark hair dripping. He's still in good shape, not the chiseled bodybuilder type, but lean and fit from his weekend bike rides and weekly basketball games with his friends. Already bookmarked some options from their registry. He says, grabbing a t-shirt from the dresser. We can look at them tonight if you want. I nod absently, watching him get dressed. Sometimes I wonder how we ended up together. Me, the impulsive social butterfly who'd rather make decisions on the fly, and him, the methodical planner who has everything organized weeks in advance. But somehow it works, or at least it has for the past 5 years. What Ethan doesn't know is that I've been feeling restless lately. Not unhappy, exactly, just bored? No, that's not quite it. Unsettled, maybe, like something's missing, but I can't put my finger on what. You're staring, Ethan says, interrupting my thoughts. Do I have something on my face? I shake my head, just thinking about how tomorrow's going to be. Your family can be a lot to handle sometimes. Tomorrow is Ethan's brother Kyle's 40th birthday party. His entire family will be there, including his parents, who still treat me like I'm on probation, even after 5 years of marriage. They're not that bad, Ethan says, but there's a hint of understanding in his voice. Just be yourself. Well, maybe yourself with a filter. I throw a pillow at him. Very funny. I'm just saying, maybe don't tell the story about how you threw up in my mom's rose bushes at our engagement party. That was one time. I protest, but I'm laughing, and it was your fault for mixing those drinks. He sits down beside me on the bed, now fully dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. We'll go, have some cake, make small talk for a couple of hours, and then we can leave. Easy. I lean my head against his shoulder. Fine. But you owe me. Always do, he says, kissing the top of my head before standing up. I'm going to make coffee. Want some? I nod, watching him leave the room. If only I knew then that tomorrow would change everything. I'm standing in Kyle and Jennifer's kitchen, my third glass of wine in hand, trying my best to look interested as Ethan's mother describes in excruciating detail the renovation of their guest bathroom. The party has been going for 2 hours already, and I've mostly managed to keep that filter Ethan mentioned firmly in place. And then the contractor said the tile we wanted was discontinued, she continues, not noticing my eyes glazing over. So we had to completely rethink the color scheme. I take another sip of wine, scanning the room for Ethan. He's across the living room, deep in conversation with his dad and Kyle. They're all laughing about something, and I feel a twinge of envy at how easy it is for him to fit in with his family. Anyway, enough about that, Ethan's mom says suddenly. How are things with you and Ethan? Any plans to start a family soon? I barely suppress a groan. This question comes up at every family gathering, without fail. We're still enjoying being just the two of us, I say, giving her the same answer I always do. We've got plenty of time. She frowns slightly. Well, don't wait too long, dear. You're already 32. I force a smile and drain my glass. I'm going to get a refill, I say, making my escape before she can continue her not-so-subtle pressure campaign. As I'm pouring more wine, I feel someone come up beside me. Escaping the motherly inquisition? Kyle asks, reaching for a beer from the cooler. I laugh, genuinely this time. Kyle has always been easier to talk to than the rest of Ethan's family. He's more laid back, less judgmental. How'd you guess? I ask. She gave Jennifer the same treatment for years before we had Zoe. He pops the cap off his beer. Speaking of which, thanks for the advice about preschools. Jen said you were super helpful. No problem. My friend's kid goes to that Montessori place I mentioned. She loves it. We chat easily for a few minutes, and I feel myself relaxing. The wine is definitely helping, making me feel warm and loose, the tension in my shoulders dissipating. Then Kyle says, it's funny. Ethan was always the cautious one growing up. Mom used to call him her little rule follower. I was surprised when he told me he was marrying someone with such a colorful past. I freeze mid-sip. What do you mean by that? Kyle's eyes widen slightly, realizing he stepped into dangerous territory. Oh, nothing bad. Just that you seem to have lived a little more, Had more experiences. I narrow my eyes. Did Ethan tell you about my past relationships? He mentioned some things back when you first started dating. Just guy talk, nothing specific. Kyle takes a long pull from his beer, clearly regretting bringing this up. But now I'm curious and maybe a little annoyed. What exactly did he say? Kyle shifts uncomfortably. Look, it was a long time ago. I don't even remember. Kyle, I say firmly, the wine making me bolder than usual. What did he say? He sighs. Just that you'd been with quite a few guys before him, that you had a higher body count than he expected. His words, not mine. Kyle quickly adds, but he said it didn't bother him. He seemed cool with it. I feel my cheeks flush, partly from embarrassment, partly from anger. And why were you two discussing my sex life in the first place? It wasn't like that, Kyle says, raising his hands defensively. We were just talking about how you two were different. He was saying opposites attract and all that. Before I can respond, I hear a loud laugh from across the room. I turn to see Jennifer chatting with some people I don't recognize, probably her friends from work. God, my brother finally found someone who could show him how it's done. Kyle suddenly calls out, his voice carrying across the room. He's clearly trying to change the subject, but his attempt at humor is disastrous. Who would have thought the straight-laced Ethan would end up with a woman who's got a higher body count than his age? The room doesn't exactly go silent. It's too loud for that, but I swear I can feel several conversations pausing. My face is burning now, and I turn to see Ethan standing just a few feet away, a plate of cake in his hand, his expression unreadable. I didn't mean. Kyle starts, but I don't hear the rest because I'm already walking away, pushing past a couple of people to get to the bathroom. I lock the door behind me, leaning against it and closing my eyes. Shit, I whisper to myself. This isn't how I wanted the night to go. There's a soft knock on the door. Allie, it's me, Ethan says. I take a deep breath and open the door. Ethan slips inside, closing it behind him. Kyle's an idiot, he says immediately. He's had too much to drink. Did you tell him about my past? I ask, my voice sharper than I intended. Ethan looks uncomfortable. We talked about it a little, years ago, when we first started dating, but I never gave him details or anything. So you were discussing my sex life with your brother? I can hear my voice rising and try to control it. We don't need the entire party listening to this conversation through the bathroom door. It wasn't like that, Ethan says, echoing Kyle's defense. We were just talking, brother to brother. I never thought he'd bring it up, especially not like this. I cross my arms. You told me my past didn't matter to you. It doesn't, he says quickly, too quickly. I study his face, seeing something there I haven't noticed before. Doubt? Discomfort? Does it bother you, how many people I've been with? No, he says, but there's a slight hesitation. Like I said when we first talked about it, what happened before we met doesn't matter. But something has shifted in his eyes, and I feel a cold knot forming in my stomach. Kyle's stupid joke has reopened a door that Ethan had supposedly closed years ago. We should go back out there, Ethan says after an awkward silence. People will wonder where we are. Fine, I say, turning to the mirror to check my makeup. But this conversation isn't over. I'm sitting at our kitchen table the next morning, nursing a cup of coffee and a mild hangover. The rest of the party had been uncomfortable, to say the least. We'd stayed another hour, making stiff small talk with various relatives before making our excuses and leaving. The drive home had been mostly silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Ethan comes into the kitchen, already showered and dressed even though it's only 8:30 on a Sunday. Morning, he says, heading straight for the coffee pot. How are you feeling? Like I drank too much wine while being humiliated in front of your entire family. I reply, not bothering to hide my irritation. He sighs, pouring himself a cup and sitting across from me. Kyle texted me this morning. He feels terrible about what happened. He should, I say, but I'm not sure he's the only one who should be apologizing. Ethan's brow furrows. What's that supposed to mean? I set my cup down carefully. You told me when we got serious that my past didn't bother you, that you weren't judging me for the number of people I'd been with before you. I wasn't. I'm not. Then why did you discuss it with Kyle? And don't tell me it was just guy talk. You must have had a reason for bringing it up. Ethan runs a hand through his hair, a gesture I know means he's uncomfortable. I was processing it, okay? When you first told me about your past, I was a little surprised. I needed someone to talk to about it. And you chose your brother? The one person guaranteed to bring it up at the most inappropriate moment possible? That's not fair, Ethan says, his voice hardening. I didn't know he'd do that. And it was years ago, Allie. Why are we fighting about this now? I lean forward. Because I saw your face last night when Kyle made that joke. You looked, I don't know, embarrassed, like he'd revealed some shameful secret about me. I was embarrassed for him, not for you, Ethan protests, but I can tell he's not being entirely truthful. So it really doesn't bother you? The fact that I've been with more people than you have? He hesitates just a fraction too long before saying, no, it doesn't. I feel something cold and hard settling in my chest. You're lying. I'm not. You are, I interrupt. I can see it in your face, Ethan. You've been judging me this whole time, haven't you? Thinking I'm some kind of, what? Slut? Whore? What's the word you'd use? Jesus, Allie, stop putting words in my mouth, he says, standing up abruptly. I've never thought of you like that. Then what do you think? I demand. He's quiet for a long moment, and when he speaks, his voice is controlled, measured. I think we have different values when it comes to sex and relationships. And yes, sometimes I wonder about that, whether it means something about us, about our compatibility. The words hit me like a slap. So you've been judging me all this time. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, I retort, pushing back from the table. You've been pretending to be okay with my past, but deep down, you think less of me because of it. I never said I think less of you, Ethan says, his frustration evident. You're twisting my words. Am I? Then tell me plainly, does the number of people I've slept with bother you? He looks away, and in that moment, I have my answer. Wow, I say softly. 5 years of marriage, and I'm just finding out now that you've been secretly disapproving of me the whole time. That's not true, Ethan says, but there's a defensiveness in his tone that tells me I've hit close to the mark. I love you, Allie. Your past is your past. But it colors how you see me, doesn't it? He doesn't answer, which is an answer in itself. I feel tears welling up but refuse to let them fall. I need some air, I say, grabbing my phone and keys. Don't wait up. I'm sitting in my car outside my best friend Tasha's apartment building, trying to get my emotions under control before going inside. I've just spent the last hour driving around aimlessly, replaying my conversation with Ethan in my head. I think, how could he do this to me? After all these years, he's still hung up on something that happened before we even met. My phone buzzes with another text from Ethan. It's the 5th one in the past hour. Please come home so we can talk about this rationally. I don't want one stupid comment from Kyle to drive a wedge between us. I toss the phone onto the passenger seat without responding. I'm too angry to talk to him right now, too hurt by the realization that the man I married has been secretly judging me all this time. Taking a deep breath, I finally get out of the car and head up to Tasha's apartment. She opens the door on the first knock, taking one look at my face before pulling me into a hug. What happened? She asks, leading me to her couch. Ethan's brother made a joke about my body count at his birthday party, I say, the words spilling out. And now Ethan's admitting that he's always been bothered by how many people I've been with. Tasha's eyes widen. Seriously? After all this time? I nod, feeling the tears I've been holding back finally start to fall. He said he never judged me for it, but that's a lie. I could see it in his face, Tash. He thinks I'm, I don't know, tainted or something. She hands me a tissue. That's so messed up. What exactly did he say? I recount the conversation as best I can remember it, my anger rekindling as I do. And the worst part is, he's the one who said it didn't matter when we first talked about our pasts. He lied to me from the beginning. Tasha frowns. Did you ever think maybe he was trying to convince himself it didn't matter? That he wanted to be okay with it, even if he wasn't completely? That's still lying, I insist. And why is it even an issue? So I've been with more people than him. Big deal. It's not like I was cheating on anyone. I was single, having fun. I know, Tasha says soothingly. You didn't do anything wrong, but some guys are weird about this stuff, even the supposedly progressive ones. Ethan was supposed to be different, I say, wiping my eyes. He was supposed to love me for who I am, not in spite of my past. Tasha sighs. Look, I'm not defending him, but maybe you should talk to him again when you're both calmer. 5 years of marriage is a lot to throw away over one conversation. I'm not saying I want to end our marriage, I protest, though the thought has crossed my mind in the past few hours. I don't know if I can be with someone who's been secretly judging me all this time. Fair enough, Tasha says, but at least hear him out before you make any decisions. People say stupid things when they're caught off guard. Maybe he didn't mean it the way it sounded. I nod, not entirely convinced, but willing to consider the possibility. Can I stay here tonight? I'm not ready to go home yet. Of course, she says, squeezing my hand. Whatever you need. I'm lying on Tasha's guest bed that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the past 2 days in my mind. My phone buzzes again. Another text from Ethan. I'm sorry for how I handled our conversation. Please come home so we can talk. I love you. I sigh, setting the phone down without responding. Part of me wants to go home, to try to work this out, but another part, the wounded, angry part, wants him to suffer a little longer, to feel the uncertainty I'm feeling now. I think, how could he let his brother's stupid joke get to him like that? After 5 years together, how could he still be hung up on something so insignificant? But as I lie there, other thoughts start to creep in. Memories of small comments Ethan has made over the years, subtle judgments I'd brushed off at the time. The way he reacted when I ran into an ex at a restaurant once, his quiet discomfort when I mentioned certain parts of my past. Had the signs been there all along? Had I just been too in love, too eager to believe he accepted me completely to notice? I roll onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter around me. The worst part is, I can't even say I'm completely surprised. There was always something, a tiny reservation I sensed in him, but chose to ignore. A slight tensing of his body when certain topics came up, a change in his expression when I mentioned certain ex-boyfriends. But he'd always assured me it didn't matter, that he loved me for who I was, not who I'd been with before him. Now I'm not sure what to believe. I'm standing in our kitchen 3 days later, having finally returned home the previous evening to an awkward, stilted conversation with Ethan that resolved nothing. He's at work now, and I'm trying to decide what to make for dinner, as if maintaining this domestic routine will somehow fix the fracture in our marriage. My phone rings, and I see it's Kyle. I consider letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity gets the better of me. Hello? I answer, my tone making it clear I'm not in the mood for pleasantries. Allie, thank God, Kyle says, sounding genuinely relieved. I've been trying to reach you for days. I've been busy, I say coldly. I know, and I'm so sorry about what happened at the party. I was drunk and stupid, and I never should have said what I did. I lean against the counter. No, you shouldn't have. I feel terrible. Ethan told me you guys have been fighting because of it. I pause, surprised that Ethan has been discussing our problems with Kyle again. Did he tell you what we've been fighting about? Kyle hesitates. He said, you think he's been judging you for your past. And what did he say about that? Did he deny it? Another hesitation. Look, Allie, I don't want to get in the middle of this. You already are in the middle of it, Kyle, I snap. You're the one who brought it up in the first place. He sighs. Fair enough. Ethan didn't really say whether it bothers him or not. He just said he's afraid of losing you and doesn't know how to fix things. I feel a twinge of something, sympathy maybe, or just exhaustion with the whole situation. Well, he could start by being honest with me. For what it's worth, Kyle says cautiously, I think he's being honest when he says he loves you. Whatever issues he might have, that part is real. I'm not sure if that makes things better or worse. Thanks for calling, Kyle, and for the apology. Does that mean you forgive me? I'm working on it, I say, which is true. Kyle's joke was inappropriate, but it's not really the source of the problem. It just exposed something that was already there, lurking beneath the surface of my marriage. After hanging up, I stare at the phone in my hand, thinking about what Kyle said. Ethan is afraid of losing me. But is that enough? Can I stay with someone who claims to love me but can't fully accept my past? I'm sitting at our dining room table that evening, picking at the pasta I made, while Ethan sits across from me doing the same. We've barely spoken since I came home, just polite exchanges about practical matters. I talked to Kyle today, I say finally, breaking the silence. He called to apologize. Ethan looks up. That's good. He feels really bad about what happened. He also mentioned that you talked to him about our fight. Ethan sets down his fork. I didn't go into detail. He called to check in, and I told him we were having some issues because of what he said. Why do you keep discussing our personal problems with your brother? I ask, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. It wasn't like that, Ethan says defensively. He called to apologize, and I couldn't pretend everything was fine when it isn't. I push my plate away, no longer hungry. Is that what you want? For things to be fine between us? Of course it is, he says, looking genuinely surprised by the question. You're my wife, Allie. I love you. But you don't respect me, I say bluntly. Not completely. Not if you've been judging me for my sexual history all this time. Ethan runs a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing, but now see as a sign of his discomfort with the truth. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, I challenge him. Make me understand why the number of people I slept with before we met matters to you. He's quiet for a long moment, and I can see him struggling with how to answer. Finally, he says, it's not about the number itself. It's about what it might say about how we view intimacy differently. What does that mean? It means, he says carefully, that I've always seen sex as something meaningful, something I only share with someone I care deeply about. And I guess I've wondered if you see it the same way, or if it's less significant to you. I feel a flash of anger. So because I've been with more people, I must think sex is less meaningful? That's a pretty big assumption, Ethan. I know, he admits. And part of me knows it's not fair. But it's there, this nagging question I can't quite shake. In 5 years of marriage, did I ever give you reason to doubt how much I value our intimacy, our relationship? He shakes his head. No, you've been a wonderful wife, Allie. That's why I feel so ashamed of these thoughts. But not ashamed enough to deal with them yourself instead of discussing them with Kyle, I point out. Ethan looks genuinely remorseful. That was years ago when we first started dating. I was still processing everything, trying to understand my own feelings. And in all the years since, you never thought to revisit the conversation with me? To be honest about your concerns? I thought I'd moved past it, he says. I convinced myself it didn't matter. But it does matter, I say softly. It's always mattered to you. He doesn't deny it, which is perhaps the most honest he's been about this whole situation. I don't know if I can stay with someone who thinks less of me because of my past, I tell him, the words painful but necessary. Who judges me for experiences that happened before we even met? I don't think less of you, Ethan insists. It's just different values, maybe. But that doesn't mean I don't love you or respect you. Doesn't it, though? I ask. If you've been secretly disapproving of my choices all this time, how is that respect? He has no answer for that. I think I need some time to think, I say, standing up from the table. I'm going to stay at Tasha's for a while. Ethan looks stricken. Allie, please, we can work through this. Can we? I ask. Because right now, I'm not sure there's anything to work through. You either accept me for who I am, past and all, or you don't. As I pack a bag in our bedroom, I can hear Ethan in the living room, pacing back and forth. Part of me wants him to come in, to fight for me, to convince me that he truly can move past his judgments. But he doesn't, and I'm left wondering if that's because he knows he can't. I'm sitting in Tasha's living room 2 weeks later, a glass of wine in hand, staring at my phone. Ethan has texted every day since I left, his messages growing increasingly desperate. I miss you. Please come home. We need to talk about this in person. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've responded occasionally, brief acknowledgments that do nothing to resolve the situation. I'm still hurt, still angry, and still unsure if our marriage can survive this revelation. You know you'll have to talk to him eventually, Tasha says, settling onto the couch beside me. You can't avoid him forever. I know, I sigh, setting down my phone. I'm just not sure what there is to say at this point. Maybe hear what he has to say first, she suggests. He's been blowing up your phone. Clearly he wants to fix things. I take a sip of wine. Or he just doesn't want to be the bad guy who let his marriage fall apart over his own insecurities. Tasha gives me a look. That's cynical, even for you. She's right, of course. In all our years together, Ethan has never been petty or self-serving. It's one of the things I've always loved about him, his integrity, his genuineness, which makes his hidden judgment of me all the more painful. Fine, I say finally. I'll meet with him tomorrow, but I'm not promising anything. I'm sitting across from Ethan at a cafe we used to frequent when we were first dating. Neutral territory seemed important for this conversation. He looks terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his usually neat hair unkempt, his clothes wrinkled as if he slept in them. I feel a pang of concern despite myself. Are you okay? I ask as he takes a seat. No, he says bluntly. I'm miserable without you, Allie. I fiddle with my coffee cup. I'm not exactly thriving either. He reaches across the table tentatively, not quite touching my hand. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past 2 weeks. About us, about my issues with your past. And, I prompt when he hesitates, and I realize something I should have understood years ago, he says. My discomfort was never really about you or your choices. It was about me and my insecurities. I raise an eyebrow, skeptical, but willing to listen. I was raised with certain expectations, he continues. Certain ideas about relationships and sex that I never really questioned. And when I met you, someone who had lived so differently from me, but who I loved so deeply, it forced me to examine those beliefs. And did you? Examine them? He sighs. I thought I had. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd moved past it. But Kyle's stupid joke brought it all back, and I realized I hadn't dealt with it at all. I just buried it. That's insightful, I admit, but it doesn't change the fact that you've been judging me all this time. I know, he says, looking genuinely remorseful. And I can't change that, but I can change going forward. I can work on these issues, really work on them this time. I study his face, searching for sincerity. And what if you can't? What if these different values you mentioned are too fundamental to overcome? Then that's on me, not you, he says firmly. You didn't do anything wrong, Allie. Your past is part of what made you the woman I fell in love with. If I can't accept that, it's my loss. His words touch something in me, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we can find our way back from this. But I'm not ready to surrender my hurt just yet. I need to know that you respect me, I say, completely. Not despite my past, but including it. I do, he says, and this time I can see the truth in his eyes. I respect your choices, your autonomy, your right to have lived your life before me however you wanted to. And I'm sorry it took me so long to fully understand that. I take a deep breath. I want to believe you, Ethan. I really do. But how do I know this won't come up again the next time someone makes a joke or I run into an ex? I can't promise it will never cross my mind again, he says honestly. But I can promise to deal with it differently, to talk to you instead of bottling it up or discussing it with someone else, to recognize it as my issue to work on, not something wrong with you. It's not a perfect answer, but it's a real one. And after 5 years together, I know Ethan well enough to recognize when he's being truthful. I'm not ready to come home yet, I tell him. I need more time. He nods, disappointment visible on his face, but acceptance there too. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. As we part ways outside the cafe, he kisses my cheek gently. I love you, Allie. All of you. I hope you know that. For the first time in 2 weeks, I feel a genuine smile forming. I'm starting to remember. I'm standing in the foyer of our home a month later, my suitcase beside me. Ethan is watching me nervously from the living room doorway, clearly unsure what my presence means. Does this mean you're coming back? He asks cautiously. I nod. I'm willing to try at least. The relief on his face is palpable as he steps forward to take my bag. I've missed you so much. I've missed you too, I admit. But we still have work to do, Ethan. This isn't fixed just because I'm home. I know, he says seriously. I've been seeing a therapist, actually, trying to understand why I've had these hang-ups and how to move past them. This surprises me. Ethan has always been resistant to therapy, viewing it as unnecessary for someone who, in his words, has their life together. The fact that he sought help shows me how seriously he's taking this. That's good, I say, genuinely impressed. How's it going? He leads me into the living room, where I notice subtle changes, new throw pillows, a plant I don't recognize, books that weren't there before. He's been keeping busy in my absence. It's challenging, he admits, sitting beside me on the couch, but helpful. My therapist has been working with me on recognizing where these judgments come from and how to challenge them. And where do they come from? I ask, genuinely curious. Ethan looks thoughtful. A lot of places. My parents' expectations, for sure. Religious influences, even though I'm not particularly religious anymore. And my own insecurities. Insecurities about what? He looks embarrassed now. About whether I measure up, whether I'm enough for you, given your broader experience. This catches me off guard. You think I'm comparing you to other men I've been with? Not consciously, he says quickly, but somewhere in the back of my mind, yes. I think that's been part of my discomfort all along. I move closer to him on the couch, taking his hand in mine. Ethan, that's never been the case. Never. You're the man I chose to marry, to build a life with. No one else has ever come close. He squeezes my hand. I know that now, or at least I'm working on truly believing it. We talk for hours that night, more openly and honestly than we have in years, about our fears, our insecurities, the things we've kept hidden from each other. It's painful at times, but necessary, like lancing a wound to let it heal properly. By the time we go to bed, together for the first